The smell of old books and chalk dust still clung to my memories, a comforting scent from a life I'd poured myself into. For 40 years, I, Mae Thompson, shaped young minds, taught them sums and stories, and believed in the power of nurturing. When I retired at 65, I thought that same dedication would simply shift, finding its new home within my own family. And it did, for a time. Every month, my modest pension of $2,500 landed in my account, and every month it flowed right back out. A steady stream directed towards keeping our sprawling suburban home a comfortable haven for my son, Tom, his wife, Claire, and my bright granddaughter, Lily. There were college tuition fees for Lily, unexpected roof repairs, a new dishwasher when the old one finally gave up the ghost, and countless small luxuries, new clothes for the kids, a weekend getaway for Tom and Claire, even just the extra groceries that kept the fridge full. I never questioned it. It was what mothers did, what grandmothers did. I'd always taken care of everything, from lesson plans to scraped knees, and I saw no reason to stop now. Their comfort was my comfort, their happiness, my own. I poured my heart into raising them, only to find my own son cracking jokes at my expense, a thought that would come much later. One Sunday, we were all gathered around the dining table, the air thick with the aroma of my slow-cooked roast and the clinking of forks against plates. Lily, now 20 and home from college for the weekend, was chatting animatedly about her classes. Tom, 47, nodded along, his attention half on his phone. Claire, 45, my daughter-in-law, was detailing some minor household crisis she'd averted that week. Honestly, Claire said, waving her fork dismissively, it's a good thing my father always took care of everything. I don't know what I'd do without someone to just handle things. Tom chuckled, not even looking up. Lily just kept talking about her professor. The words weren't aimed at me, not directly, but they landed with a dull thud right in my chest. My father. Not our father. Not my late husband. Not even the woman sitting right there who'd been handling things for decades. Just her father. It was a casual remark, easily overlooked, but it reinforced a quiet truth I'd been feeling for a while. My role was to provide, to facilitate, to be the background hum of their lives, never to be the one who took care of everything in a way that truly mattered, in a way that earned recognition. My weekends were a blur of activity, a testament to my ongoing service. Saturdays often started with Lily's request for a ride to the library or a friend's house, followed by a trip to the grocery store to stock up for the week. Sundays were reserved for the big family dinner, a tradition I'd maintained since Tom was a boy. I'd spend hours in the kitchen, preparing meals, baking cookies, ensuring everything was perfect. Sometimes I'd even plan little excursions, a day trip to the botanical gardens, a picnic by the lake, all meticulously organized and funded by me. Each act of service, each meal, each carefully planned outing was met with pleasant smiles and nods of approval. Thanks, Mom, Tom would say, a quick peck on my cheek. This is lovely, Mae, Claire would add, already reaching for her phone. Never a deep, heartfelt thank you. Never a moment where they truly saw the effort, the sacrifice. It was just expected. Lately, though, a new pattern had emerged. I'd be in the living room, perhaps reading a book or knitting, when I'd hear Tom and Claire's voices from the kitchen, low, conspiratorial. So, for the trip, We're thinking, Claire would begin. Yeah, I've got the dates squared away, Tom would respond. They'd discuss hotels, flights, itineraries. Their voices would carry, not loud enough to be rude, but certainly not quiet enough to be private. They'd talk about we and us, about plans that clearly didn't include me. I'd listen, my hands still, the yarn slipping through my fingers. A nagging feeling, cold and unwelcome, began to take root in my heart. It wasn't just that I wasn't invited. It was that I wasn't even considered. I was in the house, a fixture, like the antique grandfather clock in the hall, ticking away, marking time, but no longer truly part of the vibrant living rhythm of their lives. The feeling of displacement, subtle at first, was slowly, steadily growing. The quiet hum of the dishwasher had become the soundtrack to my evenings, a constant reminder of the meals I prepared, the dishes I washed, the endless cycle of domesticity that now defined my days. Weeks turned into months since Claire's casual remark about her father, and the subtle shifts in family dynamics had only solidified. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic change, but a slow, almost imperceptible erosion of my place, like pebbles smoothed by a relentless tide. Family gatherings, once the highlight of my week, now felt like carefully choreographed performances, where I was an extra, occasionally called upon for a line, but mostly relegated to the background. There was Tom's 47th birthday, for instance. I'd spent 2 days baking his favorite lemon meringue pie, a recipe he'd loved since childhood. The house was filled with friends and extended family. Henry, my late husband's brother, was there, always a comforting presence, though he kept mostly to himself, observing. Dr. Emily Green, my lifelong friend, a retired psychologist, also attended, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Everyone was laughing, talking loudly over the music I'd carefully selected. I tried to share a story about Tom's first birthday, a sweet memory of him covered in cake frosting, but before I could even get to the punchline, Claire chimed in, her voice bright and a little too loud. Oh, Mae, that's a lovely memory, but let's hear some. If a Sanford, que seria chinkaing. To make everyone laugh out loud, saying yini. She then turned to one of her friends, launching into an anecdote about a disastrous camping trip she and Tom had taken years ago. Was in the sun. The laughter of Paus was genuine, boisterous, and entirely exclusive. I felt my smile falter, my anecdote dying on my lips. I just nodded, a polite vacant gesture, and retreated to the kitchen to refill the chip bowls. Emily caught my eye from across the room, a flicker of understanding in her gaze, but I quickly looked away. I wasn't ready to acknowledge it, not yet. It happened again and again. At Sunday dinners, if I offered an opinion on current events or a suggestion for a home improvement project, Tom would often grunt noncommittally, while Claire would offer a tight-lipped smile or a dismissive wave of her hand. Oh, Mae, you don't need to worry about that, she'd say, as if my input was a burden rather than a contribution. Sometimes she'd even exchange a quick, almost imperceptible glance with Tom, a silent communication that spoke volumes. I imagined their eyes rolling, though I never actually saw it. I just felt it, a cold prickle on my skin. More often than not, I found myself sitting alone on the sofa, a cup of tea growing cold in my hands, while Tom, Claire, and Lily were engrossed in their own conversations. They'd talk about college gossip, work politics, or plans for the upcoming holiday season. Inside, jokes would fly back and forth, references to people or events I knew nothing about. Lily, bless her heart, would sometimes try to loop me in, a quick, "Grandma, remember when?" But her parents would quickly steer the conversation back to their own orbit. I would nod, smile weakly, and pretend to be absorbed in the patterns of the rug, the sting of being sidelined a familiar ache now. Yet I still served as the gracious host, ensuring everyone had enough to eat. Their drinks were full, their comfort prioritized above my own. It was a habit ingrained over decades, and breaking it felt like tearing a piece of myself away. The house, once a bustling hub of family life, began to feel like a stage where I played a supporting role. My lines cut, my presence diminished. I started spending more time in my room, reading, knitting, anything to avoid the quiet hum of their lives downstairs that felt increasingly separate from mine. Then came the whispers about the summer trip. I'd overheard Claire talking on the phone to a friend. "Oh, we're so excited for the cruise. Just us, you know, a real getaway." Cruise. Just us. The words echoed the earlier conversations I'd overheard, the plans made without my input. I hadn't been explicitly told I wasn't invited, but the implication hung heavy in the air, a suffocating blanket of exclusion. My pension, which funded so much of their daily comfort, would likely still contribute to the household while they were away, enjoying a real getaway that I was clearly not a part of. A cold dread settled in my stomach. It wasn't just a trip, it was a symbol, a stark confirmation of my growing irrelevance. The lingering unease wasn't just about the vacation, it was about what it represented, a complete erasure from their lives, setting the stage for a betrayal I was not yet prepared to face. The unease about the cruise had festered for a few weeks, a low thrum beneath the surface of my daily life. I didn't ask about it directly, couldn't bring myself to. It felt like admitting I was expecting to be excluded, and some part of me, the part that still clung to the idea of being a valued matriarch, refused to give them that satisfaction. I just continued with my routine, a silent observer in my own home. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, the phone rang. It was Tom. His voice was a little too cheerful, a little too casual. "Hey, Mom," he began. "How are you doing?" "I'm fine, Tom. Just finished up some gardening," I replied, my voice betraying none of the apprehension I felt. Good. Listen, Claire and I were wondering if you could help us out with something. Financially, I mean." My heart sank. It wasn't an unusual request, but the timing, coupled with the cruise whispers, made it feel different, loaded, like a carefully placed chess piece. "Help out with what, exactly?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. He launched into a convoluted explanation about an unexpected expense, a sudden repair needed for their car, a higher than anticipated bill for Lily's college textbooks, something about a new investment opportunity Claire was looking into that required immediate capital. It was a jumble of reasons, none of them quite adding up, all of them designed to sound urgent and unavoidable. He talked about how tight things were, how they just needed a little boost to get them through. My pension, he implied, would be that boost. "We'll pay you back, of course, Mom," he added quickly, almost as an afterthought. A promise I'd heard many times, rarely fulfilled. I listened, my mind racing. The cruise, the car repair, the textbook bill. It felt like a carefully constructed narrative, designed to extract funds without revealing the true purpose. I knew, deep down, that this help was likely going towards their getaway. Yet, I couldn't bring myself to refuse. Not yet. The ingrained habit of supporting them, of being their safety net, was too strong. I told him I'd look at my accounts and get back to him. A few days later, we had another family dinner. The atmosphere was strained, at least for me. Tom and Claire were overly solicitous, asking about my day, complimenting my cooking with an enthusiasm that felt forced. Lily, sensing the tension, was quieter than usual. As I cleared the plates, I caught snippets of their conversation from the living room. Claire's voice, hushed but sharp, carried through the archway. "She'll come around. She always does." Then Tom's low murmur, followed by Claire's distinct, almost triumphant laugh. It was a short, sharp sound, devoid of genuine mirth, more like a punctuation mark to a private joke. It cut through me, a cold slice of realization. They weren't just asking for help, they were expecting it. They were discussing me, my willingness to provide, as if I were a predictable resource, a well they could always draw from. I felt like a pawn in their plans, a piece on their chessboard, moved around at their convenience. The thought was bitter, but I immediately tried to push it away. No, that wasn't fair. They needed me. They needed my wisdom, my experience, my unwavering support. I was their anchor. Surely they valued that. They just had a lot on their plates, and I was simply doing what I always did, making their lives easier. I brushed off the feeling, telling myself I was overthinking it, that my imagination was running wild. It was just a family needing a little help, and I was the one who could provide it. Later that evening, after everyone had gone to bed, I couldn't sleep. The whispers, the laughter, Tom's loaded request, it all swirled in my mind. I got up, restless, and wandered into the attic. It was a place I rarely visited, a repository of forgotten memories, dusty boxes filled with relics of a life lived. I was looking for an old photo album, something to distract myself, to remind me of happier times. As I rummaged through a large trunk filled with my late husband's things, old college textbooks, his military uniform from decades ago, a collection of his father's tools, my fingers brushed against a thick, official-looking envelope. It was tucked beneath a pile of faded letters, almost hidden. I pulled it out. It felt heavier than just a few papers. The envelope was brittle with age, its seal unbroken. On the front, in my late husband's neat, precise handwriting, were the words, "For May, when you need it most." I stared at it, a strange premonition stirring within me. What could be so important, so personal, that he would leave it for me with such a cryptic message? I didn't open it then, just held it, the weight of it a tangible presence in my hands. I placed it carefully on top of the trunk, a stack of papers mixed in with old photos and memories, hinting at their significance, waiting for a moment when I would truly understand. The envelope from the attic sat on my bedside table for a few days, a silent, unopened mystery. I kept glancing at it, a strange mix of curiosity and dread swirling within me. I hadn't yet given Tom the money he'd requested, telling him I needed a few more days to sort out my accounts. He hadn't pressed, which was unusual, and that only amplified my unease. One afternoon, I was in the kitchen, preparing a light lunch. The back door was ajar. letting in the gentle breeze, and I could hear Tom and Claire talking in the backyard. They thought I was out, perhaps in the garden, or maybe they simply didn't care if I overheard. Their voices were low at first, then grew louder, more animated. "So, we'll use the money from Mom for the deposit on the cruise," Claire was saying, her tone bright and decisive. "And then, once we're back, we can finalize the refinancing on the house. That'll free up some capital for the investment." My blood ran cold. The cruise, the refinancing, my money. It all clicked into place with a sickening thud. Tom's convoluted excuses for needing money, Claire's triumphant laughter, the hushed conversations. It wasn't for car repairs or textbooks. It was for their vacation and some grander financial scheme that clearly didn't involve me. "Are you sure about the refinancing, Tom?" Claire continued, a hint of impatience in her voice. "I mean, it's a good deal, but it means we'd be solely responsible for the mortgage. What if something goes wrong?" Tom's reply was a low mumble, something about Mom's pension and security. I strained to hear, my hands gripping the countertop. Then Claire's voice, sharp and dismissive, cut through the air. "Honestly, Tom, why are you still worrying about her? She's 71. Why is she even still alive?" The words hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just dismissive. They were cruel, chillingly cold. My breath hitched in my throat. I stood frozen, listening, hoping I'd misheard, that my aging ears had played a trick on me. But then Tom's laughter followed, a short, sharp burst of it, devoid of warmth, echoing Claire's earlier joyless chuckle. It wasn't a hearty laugh, but a complicit one, a sound that confirmed he agreed, that he found humor in the idea of my impending demise, his own mother, my son, the boy I had nurtured, protected, sacrificed for, was laughing at the thought of me being gone. The laughter pierced me, 1,000 tiny shards of glass shattering in my chest. I felt the weight of their contempt, a crushing burden that stole the air from my lungs. It wasn't just about money or a cruise or being excluded from plans. It was about my very existence being an inconvenience, a burden they wished would simply disappear. My internal landscape, already shifting, now fractured completely. The illusion of being a valued matriarch, of being needed and loved, crumbled into dust. I was no longer just invisible. I was an obstacle. I realized, with a clarity that was both devastating and liberating, that I was no longer valued. I was merely a resource, a means to an end, a problem they hoped would resolve itself. I stumbled away from the kitchen, my legs suddenly weak. The sound of their voices, still chatting casually in the backyard, followed me. I made it to my room, closing the door softly, as if a loud noise might shatter what little was left of me. I sank onto the edge of my bed, tears streaming down my face, silent and hot. I didn't sob. I simply wept, a deep, guttural sorrow that felt like it was tearing me apart from the inside. But amidst the overwhelming grief, a tiny spark ignited, a fierce, protective flame I hadn't felt in years. This pain, this profound betrayal, could not be endured again. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand, my jaw clenching. I vowed, in that moment of raw, unadulterated agony, that I would never let them hurt me like this again. It was the first moment of my newfound resolve, a quiet, desperate promise to myself that something had to change. The envelope on my bedside table seemed to pulse with a new, urgent significance. The vow I made in the quiet despair of my room felt like a fragile seed, planted in scorched earth. It was a promise to myself, a desperate attempt to reclaim some semblance of dignity from the wreckage of their words. The next few days were a blur of muted pain. I moved through the house like a ghost, performing my usual tasks, but with an autopilot detachment. Tom and Claire seemed oblivious, or perhaps they simply didn't care to notice the hollowness in my eyes. They were too busy discussing their upcoming cruise, the details of which I now understood were funded by my unwitting contribution. I still hadn't given them the money, a small act of defiance I hadn't even consciously decided upon. Late at night, when the house was finally silent, I would sit at my small writing desk, the unopened envelope from my late husband still on the table beside me. I pulled out an old, leather-bound journal, a gift from Emily years ago, and began to write. The words poured out, a torrent of pain, anger, and a dawning clarity. I wrote about the casual dismissal, the feeling of being invisible, the sting of Claire's remark, and the crushing blow of Tom's laughter. It was funny how a few careless words could untangle a heart, I reflected, my pen scratching furiously across the page. The act of putting it all down, of seeing the betrayal starkly laid out in my own hand, was both agonizing and cathartic. It helped me process the pain, to find a pattern in their behavior that had been there all along, hidden beneath my own willingness to serve. One morning, after a particularly restless night, I decided I needed to talk to someone. Not Tom or Claire, certainly. Not even Lily, who was still too young, too caught between her parents and me. I needed an outside perspective, someone who understood the complexities of family dynamics. I picked up the phone and called Emily. "Mae, darling, it's been too long." Emily's warm voice filled my ear. "How are you?" I hesitated, then found myself pouring out the entire story, the words tumbling out in a rush. Emily listened patiently, her occasional hums and soft murmurs the only interruptions. When I finally finished, a heavy silence hung between us for a moment. "Mae," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "you've spent your entire life pouring into others. It's time, my dear, to pour into yourself. You deserve to be seen, to be valued, to be happy. For once, put yourself first." Her words resonated deeply. Emily, with her years as a psychologist, had a way of cutting through the noise, of getting straight to the heart of the matter. She didn't offer platitudes. She offered validation and a quiet encouragement to reclaim my agency. She reminded me of the strength I possessed, a strength I had forgotten I had. Inspired by Emily's words, I started with small acts of independence. The next time Claire called, asking if I could babysit her friend's children at the last minute because she and Tom had an unexpected dinner invitation, I found myself saying, "Whoa, oh, I'm so sorry, Claire. I already have other plans that evening." There was a beat of silence on the other end. "Other plans?" Claire repeated, her voice laced with surprise, almost disbelief. "What kind of plans?" "Just plans," I said, a small, defiant thrill running through me. An old friend. We're catching up. It wasn't a lie. I had called Emily back, and we'd made plans for a quiet dinner. Claire mumbled something about understanding, but her tone was clearly annoyed. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. A crack had appeared in the wall of their expectations, and I had put it there. I also started spending more time online, something I usually only did for emails or reading the news. Emily had mentioned online communities for support. I discovered forums for older adults, women who were navigating similar challenges, reclaiming their power after years of self-sacrifice. Their stories were inspiring, tales of women who had found new purpose, new joy, after stepping away from toxic family dynamics. I read about women who had sold their homes, traveled the world, started new hobbies, all after realizing they deserved more than to be taken for granted. Their experiences fueled my resolve, showing me that there was a path forward, a way to redefine my life on my own terms. The seed of my vow was beginning to sprout. The small acts of defiance, the journaling, and Emily's steady encouragement had started to chip away at the years of ingrained subservience. I hadn't given Tom the money for the cruise, and surprisingly, he hadn't pressed me further. The silence on that front was almost more telling than any argument would have been. It confirmed my suspicion that they simply expected me to provide, not to question. One afternoon, a few weeks after my conversation with Emily, I finally felt ready to open the envelope from my late husband. It had sat on my bedside table, a silent sentinel, since I'd found it in the attic. The inscription, "For May, when you need it most," felt profoundly prescient now. I carefully broke the brittle seal. Inside, there wasn't just one document, but several. There was a letter, yellowed with age, in my husband's familiar hand, and beneath it, a legal document, the deed to our home. My heart hammered against my ribs as I read the letter. It was dated just a few months before he passed away, nearly 20 years ago. He wrote about his love for me, his concern for my future, and his quiet observation of how easily I put others first. He said he wanted to ensure I always had a secure foundation, a place that was unequivocally mine, free from any potential claims or pressures. He had, with the help of his brother Henry, quietly arranged for the house to be solely in my name, bypassing any complex inheritance issues that might arise later. He wanted me to have the ultimate say, the ultimate power, should I ever need it. He knew me so well, even then. I stared at the deed, then at the letter, tears blurring my vision. My husband, bless his foresight, had given me a weapon, a shield, a key to my own freedom all those years ago. He had seen what I was only just realizing. The house, this sprawling suburban home I had poured my life and pension into, was legally, entirely mine. Tom and Claire's casual talks of refinancing, of their investment, of their plans that didn't include me, suddenly took on a new, audacious arrogance. They were planning to leverage my asset, my home, without so much as a discussion, let alone my consent. The next day, I called the lawyer, whose name was listed on some of the accompanying documents. He was an older gentleman, Mr. Davies, who remembered my husband fondly. I explained the situation, the discovery of the deed, the family dynamics. He listened with a kind, understanding expression. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, his voice gentle, "your husband was a very wise man. This deed is ironclad. This house is unequivocally yours. You have every right to do with it as you please." He treated me with respect, with admiration even, for my husband's foresight and my own quiet strength in seeking counsel. It was a stark contrast to the dismissive attitudes I had grown accustomed to from Tom and Claire. Here, in this quiet office, I was not an inconvenience. I was a client, a woman with rights and agency. As I left his office, a profound sense of power began to bloom within me. It wasn't a malicious power, but a quiet, resolute strength. I started connecting the dots, seeing how much my family had truly taken me for granted. My pension, the $2,500 a month, had been the backbone of their comfortable lifestyle. It wasn't just the tuition or the repairs. It was the cushion that allowed them to live beyond their means, to plan cruises and investments, all while assuming my endless, unquestioning support. My financial contributions, my emotional labor, my very presence. It had all been a given, a constant they never had to earn or even acknowledge with genuine gratitude. Back home, I began to prepare. I pulled out old bank statements, utility bills, receipts for home repairs I had paid for over the years. I made a comprehensive list, a detailed ledger of my contributions, the down payment on Tom's first car, Lily's private school fees before college, countless doctor's bills, vacations, even the new patio furniture Claire had insisted on. It was a staggering amount, far more than I had ever consciously tallied. Each item on the list was a testament to my love, but now it also felt like a tally of their entitlement. As the list grew, so did my confidence. The fragile seed of my vow was now a sturdy sapling, its roots digging deep into the soil of my newfound resolve. I was ready. Armed with the deed, Mr. Davies's confirmation, and my meticulously compiled list, a quiet storm brewed within me. The sapling of my resolve had grown into a formidable tree, its roots now unshakable. There was no going back. A few days later, I met with Mr. Davies again, this time to initiate the process of selling the house. The decision felt both terrifying and exhilarating. As I signed the papers, committing to a future entirely of my own making, a wave of empowerment washed over me. It was the first time in years, perhaps decades, that I felt truly in control of my own life, my own destiny. The house, once a symbol of my endless sacrifices, was about to become the instrument of my liberation. I knew I couldn't keep it a secret for long. The real estate agent would need to start showing the property, and the for sale sign would inevitably appear. I decided it was best to tell them myself, to face them head on. I called a family meeting for Sunday evening, after dinner. Lily was home from college again, which I was grateful for. Her presence, though she didn't know it, was a small comfort. As we sat in the living room, the same room where I had so often felt invisible, the air was thick with unspoken tension. Tom and Claire exchanged uneasy glances. They must have sensed something was amiss. I took a deep breath, clutching the armrests of my chair. "I have something important to tell you all," I began, my voice steady, betraying none of the tremor in my hands. "I've decided to sell the house." Silence. Heavy, stunned silence. Tom's jaw dropped. Claire's eyes widened, then narrowed. Lily looked from me to her parents, confusion etched on her face. "Sell the house?" Tom finally stammered, his voice incredulous. "Mom, what are you talking about? This is our home." "It's my home, Tom." I corrected him, my voice firm. "Legally, it has always been mine. Your father ensured that." I paused, letting that sink in. "And I've decided to sell it. I've already signed the papers with a real estate agent." Panic erupted. Claire jumped up, her face flushed with anger. "You can't be serious, Mae. This is outrageous. Where are we supposed to go? What about Lily's college fund? What about our plans? What about your plans, Claire? I asked, my gaze unwavering. The ones that involve refinancing my house without my knowledge or consent? The ones that involve using my pension for your cruise while you discuss how much of an inconvenience my existence is? The color drained from Tom's face. He looked at Claire, then back at me, a flicker of guilt, then anger in his eyes. Mom, that's not fair. You overheard a private conversation. We didn't mean it like that. Didn't mean it like that? I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping me. Your laughter, Tom, was quite clear, and Claire's words, why is she even still alive? I assure you, those were perfectly clear too. Claire began to plead, her voice rising in pitch. Mae, please, think about this. Where will we live? We can't afford to buy another house in this market. We'll be ruined. Her pleas quickly turned to threats. If you do this, Mae, you'll destroy this family. You'll never see your grandchildren again. Lily, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up, her voice small. Mom, Dad, what are you talking about? Grandma, what's going on? I ignored Claire's threats, focusing on Tom. I will no longer be your financial fallback, Tom. I will no longer be the silent provider, the one whose sacrifices are taken for granted while you make plans to leverage her assets and dismiss her very life. I looked at Claire. You both need to confront the reality of your entitlement. This house and my support was never a guarantee. It was a gift, freely given, and now it is being taken back. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. They realized with dawning horror the full consequences of my actions. The comfortable life they had built on my generosity, the suburban home they had taken for granted, was slipping through their fingers. Their panic was evident, raw and desperate, but I stood my ground, a quiet, unyielding force. The woman who had once been invisible was now impossible to ignore. The for sale sign went up a week later, a stark, white rectangle against the manicured green lawn. It felt like a declaration, a final, undeniable statement of my intent. The house sold quickly, faster than I expected, thanks to the booming market and its desirable location. Tom and Claire, after their initial outburst, had tried various tactics, guilt trips, desperate pleas, even a brief, half-hearted attempt at legal action that Mr. Davies quickly dismissed. But I held firm. The woman who had once been a quiet, accommodating presence was now a force to be reckoned with. The move was bittersweet. As the movers packed boxes, I walked through the empty rooms, memories flooding back, Lily's first steps in the living room, Tom's graduation party in the backyard, countless holidays filled with laughter. It was the home where I had raised my family, where I had poured my love and my life. But it was also the home where I had become invisible, where my sacrifices had been taken for granted, and where I had ultimately been betrayed. Leaving it felt like shedding an old skin, painful but necessary. I found a quaint seaside cottage a few hours' drive away, far enough to create a clear boundary, close enough that, if genuine reconciliation ever occurred, it wouldn't be impossible. It was smaller, cozier, filled with natural light and the scent of salt air. The first morning in my new home, I woke to the sound of seagulls and the gentle roar of the ocean. I made myself a cup of tea and sat on the small porch, watching the waves. Peace, a true, deep peace, settled over me for the first time in years. The fallout from my decision was swift and predictable for Tom and Claire. Without my pension and the equity from the house, their comfortable suburban life evaporated. They had to downsize dramatically, moving into a much smaller rental property. The cruise, I later heard, was canceled. Their grand investment plans, reliant on leveraging my property, never materialized. Tom, I imagine, grappled with the guilt of his complicity, while Claire, I'm sure, blamed me entirely. I hadn't heard from either of them directly since the day I told them I was selling. But there was one unexpected, heartwarming development. A few weeks after I moved, a letter arrived. It was from Lily. Her handwriting, usually so neat, was a little smudged in places, as if she'd been crying. She wrote about how much she missed me, how she understood why I had to do what I did, and how she was trying to navigate the mess her parents had created. She didn't condone their behavior, and she expressed her love for me, pure and unconditional. She enclosed a small, hand-drawn picture of us laughing together. It was a lifeline, a reminder that not all connections were severed, that some love endured. We started exchanging emails, then phone calls, slowly rebuilding our bond, one based on genuine affection and respect. My new community embraced me with open arms. I joined a local book club, started taking painting classes, and volunteered at the small town library. I made new friends, women my age and older, who shared stories, laughter, and a profound understanding of life's complexities. We went for walks on the beach, shared meals, and talked for hours. These were connections based on mutual respect and shared interests, not on obligation or expectation. Henry, my late husband's brother, visited me often, always bringing a bottle of good wine and a listening ear. Emily, of course, was a constant source of support. Her visits filled with insightful conversations and much-needed laughter. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I sat on my porch, a gentle breeze rustling through my hair. The rhythmic sound of the waves crashing on the shore was a soothing lullaby. I thought about my husband's foresight, Emily's wisdom, Lily's enduring love. I thought about the woman I had been and the woman I was becoming. The freedom I had gained was immense, a profound sense of self-reclamation. It was bittersweet, yes, the loss of my old family, dynamics, a wound that would likely never fully heal. But it was also a victory, a testament to resilience, and a powerful lesson in prioritizing my own happiness. I had learned to breathe again, truly breathe, and in that, I found my rebirth.